Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to do something a little different, and honestly, it's pretty fascinating. We're diving into a highly focused textual analysis of just one deeply foundational phrase. Often we just breeze right past titles and headings to get to the meat of the information. But today, we're stopping right at the front door. We're going to look at just a few specific words derived from our source text, and we'll unpack the immense weight, intention, and framing packed into them. But before we even get to the text itself, we have to talk about why semantic framing matters in our everyday lives. The words we use to introduce a topic, well, they don't just label it. They literally build the entire cognitive house that the listener is about to walk into. They establish the rules of engagement. When we categorize our world through semantics, we're secretly telling our brains exactly how to value that information. So let's carefully unlock this front door.
Before we look at the source material, I want you to consider a question that sets the stage for our semantic breakdown today. How do we frame the creation of our digital world? Seriously, think deeply about the implications of this for a second. If we call our digital infrastructure a simple tool, then it's just a passive object, right? We pick it up, we use it to accomplish a task, and we put it back down. If we call it a place, well, then it becomes a destination. It's somewhere we inhabit, somewhere with borders and real estate and communities. But what if it's something else entirely? What if it's something alive that grew over time? The specific terminology we choose to describe our digital landscape actually dictates how we interact with it, how we understand its turbulent past, and how we anticipate its incredibly unpredictable future.
Okay, let's dive into this exact text. This is our sole source for today, and it establishes the precise boundary of our analysis. This is what we're unpacking. Excerpts from The Digital Evolution, A History of the Internet, The Story of the Internet. It's a title, a subtitle, and a subheading all wrapped into one extremely dense package. Just listen to the punctuation. The colons separate distinct layers of meaning, kind of like a set of Russian nesting dolls. In just these few words, the author makes massive, calculated decisions about how to present the subject matter to the audience. This isn't accidental phrasing, it is a carefully engineered gateway. We're going to break this down piece by piece to see exactly how this framing works, starting from the widest possible lens and zooming all the way in.
To do this, we are going to use a macro to micro arc. Section 1, the digital evolution, the macro perspective.
Now, what is absolutely fascinating is how the text deliberately chooses the word evolution to imply a grand, naturally unfolding process. Think about it. They could have easily said the digital invention or the digital creation. Words like invention or creation, they imply a specific, isolated moment in time, a light bulb turning on, a single genius working tirelessly in a controlled lab environment to produce a finished product. But evolution, that changes absolutely everything about how we perceive the subject. By choosing this specific word, our source material frames the digital world as something fundamentally organic. It implies natural selection, adaptation, survival of the fittest, mutation, and a continuous biological style progression over decades. It tells the reader that this massive infrastructure wasn't just built by human hands, according to a master blueprint. Instead, it grew. It adapted to its environment, it outlasted obsolete technologies, and it continues to mutate right before our eyes.
And this brilliantly illustrates another key word hiding right at the very beginning of our source sentence, excerpts. We are looking at excerpts from this digital evolution. This is a crucial, honestly humbling distinction. By explicitly calling out that these are excerpts, the text openly acknowledges that the evolution of our digital world is simply too vast, too chaotic, and too sprawling to capture in its entirety. It manages our expectations right out of the gate. We're only ever looking at a curated slice of a much larger evolutionary timeline. Think of it like a digital fossil record. Just as a paleontologist can't show you every single dinosaur that ever lived, but can only show you the specific bones that survive the test of time, this text reminds us that no single document or narrative can hold the entire infinite digital history. We're looking at the fossils that mattered most.
Section 2, A History Examined, the Academic Lens.
So the crucial point here is the immense thematic tension between the academic weight of a history and the engaging narrative of a story, both of which are used in the exact same breath in our source sentence. First, we have a history. History grounds us in reality. It makes a distinct promise to the reader. It promises academic rigor, a verifiable timeline, chronological facts, peer-reviewed accuracy, and total objectivity. When we read a history, we expect the truth. But right next to it, the text abruptly pivots to the story. Story promises something completely different. It promises characters, drama, conflict, rising action, and a deeply satisfying arc. The text is making a remarkably bold dual promise here.
It's saying, we're going to give you the heavy factual weight of an encyclopedic history book, but we're going to deliver it with the gripping emotional resonance of a novel.
Section 3. The story frame. Crafting the narrative.
By specifically highlighting the story, the source dictates that we view this subject not just as cold, detached data, but as a compelling, meticulously structured narrative. Story moves us way beyond mere chronological facts and dates. Look, a list of computer protocols being invented in the 1970s is a history, but it sure isn't a story. A story implies a structured journey. It requires a clear beginning, a messy middle full of obstacles, and an ongoing unresolved arc. Most importantly, it reframes what could be a very dry, highly technical academic history into a beautifully accessible narrative. The text is essentially reaching a hand out to the audience, breaking down the barrier to entry and saying, hey, you don't need to be a software engineer or computer scientist to understand the profound impact of this. You just need to be a human being who appreciates a good story. It completely democratizes the information.
Section 4. The Internet. The microfocus.
Watch how the title builds piece by piece in a precise, expertly crafted funnel. We start all the way out at step 1, the digital evolution. That's a massive, almost philosophical, boundless concept of organic technological growth. It's infinite. Then step 2 drops us into a history of the internet. That takes that massive abstract concept and grounds it into a specific, tangible technology, evaluating it through a strict academic lens. And finally, step 3. The story of the internet. This takes that grounded, objective history and molds it into a digestible, human-centric narrative that absolutely anyone can understand. It's a literal masterclass in synthesis. The author uses just a handful of words to grab the reader from the philosophical cosmos, pull them down through the atmosphere of academic history, and land them squarely on the ground in a human story. It guides your perspective exactly where it needs to be before you even read the very first paragraph.
To conclude this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative final thought drawn straight from our text. We've seen how the author frames the internet as an evolution, a history, and a story. But remember, a story implies ongoing, unwritten chapters, and an evolution implies constant, real-time mutation. We're not just passive readers of this history. Every single time we log on, every time we connect, we are active participants in it. We are the characters in the story, and we are the environment driving the evolution. So I challenge you to consider your own place within this ongoing digital narrative. What does the story of the internet mean to you? Thank you for exploring the immense power of these few words with me today.